Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. Mailbag time. Middlekauff mailbag. Easy to get involved. Fire into my DMs at John Middlekauff, DMs wide open, fire in. Question for the mailbag. What's all the hype around the new hype on JJ McCarthy? Most of the talk is that he won a national championship while they didn't need him to be electric, throwing the ball, but he gets praised for that. Just makes me wonder why Stetson Bennett, 2-time national champion, barely got any coverage during the draft at all. And he sent me some pictures, 5'11", 190. He gave me Stetson Bennett's, and then he gave me JJ McCarthy's. Well, Stetson Bennett was one of the worst draft picks in the NFL last year by a country mile. Think about that. The Rams drafted him in the 4th round, and he fucking disappeared. Now, I've heard things, maybe you've read some things. I've heard things that I don't think are really out there, but it's been a disaster. There's no way around it. Now, listen, everyone has our own issues, but like, this is the real world. Like, I'm paying you a lot and you're not around, and clearly the Rams are not counting on him at all. I mean, they just signed Jimmy Garoppolo. Last year, they had to sign Carson Wentz at the end of the season. So Stetson Bennett's irrelevant to the NFL now. Like, to me, Stetson Bennett's much more likely to be on TV talking about college football in the next couple of years. And I have no issue with him. I thought he was a really solid college player. Stetson Bennett is a multiple-time walk-on. Played on one of the most talented teams of all time. JJ McCarthy was like a blue-chip guy for Harbaugh that easily helped him build around the best teams he's ever had, and obviously won a national championship. The other thing is the hype. What the media talks about and what the teams talk about aren't always the same, right? So the hype on Caleb Williams is one of those universal, we're all on the same page, or Zion Williamson or Bryce Harper. There are certain young guys that everyone's like, a lot of hype on the player. Trevor Lawrence, right? A Bosa. Like, there are certain players that we're all kind of in agreement on, right? Marvin Harrison, whether he goes 5 or 8, we all agree he's a good player. Then there are guys like JJ McCarthy that NFL people have been really intrigued by him for a couple years now. He started at 18, 19, and 20 years old. Isn't Stetson Bennett like 30 years old? And again, didn't even make it to week 1, which is gone. You figure it out. I mean, it's not that complicated to figure out. Dude had some issues. And JJ McCarthy, is viewed as a really good prospect on and off the field, which matters. So I think JJ McCarthy's just in a different universe as a player than Stetson Bennett. But the other thing is, like, how buttoned up you are off the field. That matters. That matters a lot. And I don't think JJ has many questions when it comes to that. This is from Ace. Morning, John. Made an account just for a question for the pod. He definitely did, because his Instagram name's kind of crazy. Do you think the NFL is going to ever be publicly traded? What would need to happen for that to come to fruition? Well, people in finance could probably describe this 500 times better than me. But I would imagine, let's use In-N-Out, for example. In-N-Out is a company that people have tried to buy or turn public for a long period of time. But they have been a family-owned operation. I think like the granddaughter runs it now. And they print money. And they just refuse to sell to anybody. Why? They're making so much money. They don't need anyone else. And it's one of those things, like, there's not a competing industry where some of these companies that go public for the influx of cash, who's the NFL competing against? So as long as they are doing well, I don't even think it's a broach subject internally. Now, you'd have to be naive, and I've said this forever. When I was early on in my life in the 90s, like growing up as a sports fan, baseball was huge. If you turned on sports talk radio, ESPN at the time, which was really the only 24/7 sports network, baseball, baseball, baseball for 6 months a year. I grew up, before I even knew who Colin was, I listened to Jim Rome. Baseball was huge on that show. Guess it was as big a sport as we had in this country. And what Michael Jordan did for the NBA, it was every bit as big as football in the 90s. Well, now football has lapped everything. But that's not for the foreseeable future, it's going to be like that, but in perpetuity. So I would never say never. But as of right now, given how much money they are making, I would say it's nowhere near anything like that happening. My question for the mailbag is this: what part does character truly play in the draft process? I've always been of the belief that in sports, talent seems to trump anything to a point. Do teams truly pass on problematic, talented players? I think this is true in life, right? In most of our businesses, you can be a crazy madman, but if you are a cash producing individual, if you are, I just saw like Apple pays AI engineers like $10 million. Google, I mean, the amount of money, do you really care if they're a little fucking nutty or crazy or have a drinking problem or whatever? Probably not. So the cream of the crop, you always look past their issues. Football, AI, whatever industry we're all in, it does not matter. But that's a very, very small percentage. Most people are not the elite of the elite. And think about the NFL draft. I don't have the percentage offhand, but the percentage of people that play in college football relative to high school is very, very small. Then a percentage of those guys that make it to the NFL is very, very small. But even in that small percentage, let's just pick an even number. I don't know the exact amount of guys, the draft picks this year. I think it's like 270, maybe 260. Let's just, for argument's sake, pick 250. Clearly 20 plus of those guys, even in the first round, right? If NFL teams on average have 15 to 20, typically graded guys as first round picks in a draft where, there are a bunch of undrafted free agents that are on the fringe, where 300 plus players are draftable and only 250 actually get drafted. Yet going into the draft, the work, like the pool, there's 20 guys viewed as way better than the rest of the guys. Now, obviously that plays out once they get into the workforce, AKA start playing football, but it doesn't matter as much for the elite of the elite, right? Jalen Carter had major red flags. He was off some draft boards. He still went 9th overall. Why? He's fucking 6'5", 300 whatever, can run like a linebacker and can pass rush inside. Those human beings don't exist on this planet. But if Jalen Carter had been, okay, same off the field stuff, but he was 6'2.5", not as talented on film, instead of playing at Georgia, played at Fresno State, maybe he goes undrafted. So the talent has a huge impact on, let's just use the draft, which I think was your question, for sure, right? Guys with issues in the past fall in the draft all the time. Travis Kelce, 3rd round pick. He even said, I was a major red flag coming out of college. Tyreek Hill, Joe Mixon, like guys fall in the draft for things that it's impossible to quantify. Was this a one-time issue? Is this an issue that's a non-negotiable in our franchise? Is this an issue that, hey, listen, we've met with the guy. Something happened when he was 19. He's been good since. We're dealing with human beings here. It's very, very hard to tell. Tyrann Mathieu, I think, is one of the great stories in the history of the league. He was kicked out of college. LSU kicked him off the team. He has been a team captain. I don't know if he is on the Saints or not. I would imagine he is. But on the Cardinals, on the Texans, and then on the Chiefs, wore the fucking C on his jersey because the team voted him as the captain. People I knew with the Chiefs around him loved him. I mean, he's not as good as he once was, but guy was kicked off the team. Now, there are a lot of guys that are in similar situations, major red flag, and then have issues in the pros. So it plays a huge role, but it's impossible to quantify everyone has a different way to gauge, like, okay, let's take him down. Or, okay, let's not take him. Also, the owner at any moment can say, let's just take the guy. And that's an element that we never truly get to find out because no GM or coach is ever saying, well, we weren't quite as sure on this guy, but the owner wanted him. Just the crazy part of the draft, man. One easy question for the pod. How have the Bengals not fired Frank Pollock yet? It's a good question. I can't even begin. I don't know. You're probably asking the wrong guy, but I appreciate the question. Question for the mailbag. I know the NFL isn't likely to add any US-based expansion teams in the near future, but when considering things like other professional teams and local college programs, what two markets do you think would make the most business sense for the league? There's also Fugazi Friday, but we'll save that. I don't think the league's adding anything, right? I think Vegas made a lot of sense that they moved the Raiders. When you really look at the recent expansion, it wasn't expansion, it was movement, right? They St. Louis, they yanked them, put them in LA, and old school people would say, St. Louis stole the team from us. St. Louis, and I remember Joe Buck, they all got up in arms like, you guys remember, you stole that team from LA. Oakland has a beef because the Raiders started there, and the Chargers just moved up the road. I don't really think there is one. I mean, name a city that's either growing or massive that isn't involved in the National Football League. I don't spend that much time thinking about this topic, but I can't see the league doing that, honestly. The thrill and excitement of March Mania is here. And DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps, is giving new customers a shot to turn $5 into $150 instantly in bonus bets with any college basketball bet. North Carolina listeners, don't forget DraftKings Sportsbook is now live in your state. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN, J-O-H-N. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Love the show and question for the mailbag. Brady is being put into the Patriots Hall of Fame in June. I know it seems likely that Belichick will not attend the ceremony based on the last few months, but wouldn't it be an even bigger story if he weren't there? So they're putting him in the Patriot Hall of Fame in June. I haven't seen that. That doesn't make that much sense to me. Like, wouldn't you want to put him in the Hall of Fame? I don't know exactly how they do it, but on a game day, I guess they retired his number last year, right? Was that week 1 he was there? Yeah, he was there week 1 for the Eagle game because didn't he run out? I don't know. I think that documentary is pretty bad. Me and Colin, Colin really likes it. I liked it until we got to the Aaron Hernandez, and then it's like, I played golf the other day with this dude that owns his whole family's been in the insurance business forever. He lives in Boston, big Boston accent, season ticket holder to the Patriots. He says him, all his friends, just the general consensus, people are pissed. That documentary, I think, jumped the shark early and fell apart, and it kind of lost me. But if I'm Bill, I'm like, this is what I told the guy. Robert's 80 plus years old, might be losing a step or two. That's human nature. That's usually what happens. But I think Jonathan Kraft is a big driving force in the Patriots. It's been reported on like he's basically running it now. I don't think Belichick would piss on him if he was on fire. And I think vice versa. I think those two can't stand each other. So it would not shock me at all. Now, I think the reason Belichick, that last press conference, which was a little weird where they kind of hugged and kissed, there is mutual respect. They made a lot of money together. They had him and Robert. I don't think he would lift a finger for Jonathan Kraft. Now, I do think Tom is different. So if I was betting, Bill would show up for Tom and not say a word to Jonathan. I've become what seems to be a 3 times a day daily listener. How you put content, you truly appreciate it. First, with the Ohtani news scandal breaking, it makes me wonder if league officials feel like the direction of gambling has taken sports as less, more, or the exact public headache they expected it to be. Are they waiting for an old school minds in the public to change and not be concerned, or do you think they generally have fears of game shattering gambling scandal? Well, think about this. For a game shattering gambling scandal, a player would have to be paid off, a player or coach. Do you know how much money players and coaches make? Now, if Ohtani was betting on himself to lose, I completely agree that's problem, right? But if he's just betting, let's just say he didn't bet on baseball. He makes $80-90 million a year. He's making $2 million on the field this year, and he's making 70 plus, I read, off the field. When you have that type money and you're a competitive guy, you're kind of bored. I gamble. I gamble for entertainment, just like a lot of people. I work for my money. So when I saw the 4.5 million, which sounds like an astronomical amount to a lot of people, Phil Mickelson was betting a couple $100,000 a game. He was making 90, 80, 70 million dollars a year for 10 plus years. Like I can bet, I bet during the NFL playoffs $5,000 on some games, which some people would be like, that's crazy. Other people would say that's not very much. So to me, the money, who cares? Like, we're all in business with gambling. We're all gambling. If you have the right to impact a game and you're gambling on it, that's a problem. But if he's not, I don't think it matters at all. Now, the reason it's a problem with a bookie is because, like, if I were to win 50 grand on DraftKings, they would send me a 1099. If I bet 50 grand on something and won 150, so I got 100 back, I would get taxed on that $50,000 as income, right? I think I've never won 50 grand gambling or bet $50,000 a game, but you know what I mean. When I bet with a bookie and I bet $50,000 and I win 50, I ain't getting taxed on that money. And when he takes the 100 grand, he ain't getting taxed either. It's tax evasion. I think the story's about, it has nothing to do with the legalities. Now, California's gambling's illegal, but it's about money laundering and tax evasion. That's why the FBI is going after these people in 2024, especially when you're talking that amount of money. If you have the ability as a bookie to front someone $4.5 million in bets, you are either extremely independently wealthy or you're working with some big conglomerate, black market thing. So I think the story kind of jumped the shark of he's gambling. Well, who gives a shit? NFL players are allowed to gamble. They just can't gamble on football. Was he gambling on baseball? To me, that's an interesting story. If he's not and he's working with his interpreter, clearly his interpreter got thrown under the bus. But the bookie thing is all about the taxes and the money. When the government can't get a hold of large amounts of money and you're not following the rules, they're going to come after you. That's why, if Ohtani had a 4.5, open credit line, think of some of the other people he was dealing with. This guy could have been dealing with millions upon $1 million worth of bets, meaning when he wins, which, clearly Ohtani's guy owed him $4.5 million. You think he's reporting that to Uncle Sam? Hell no. I don't exactly know how he would get that money back into the real world because cash, like I couldn't walk into like the Ferrari dealership and hand them 300 grand for a Ferrari, right? I couldn't show up to, Silverleaf down the road if I had $10 million in cash and just buy a $10 million house. It's not legal to do any of that stuff. You would have to prove where the money came from. So it seems like he has some bigger problems on his hands. But to me, the scandal is all about betting on your own sport, which these leagues are very, very strict on, which they should be because the integrity of the game, right? For the leagues, the health of the leagues. But I also got news for you. All this shit's good for business. This is all entertainment. This is not real life. It's their real life, but the whole business model is entertainment. Now, there's a fine line of like WWE can't be scripted, but it's much, much closer non-scripted to that than it is like turn on the news and see them reporting on some war. which who even knows if they're telling the truth either, but you know what I mean. Love the podcast. By far the best NFL discussion. God, a lot of positive people. I appreciate all the kind words. So many cookie cutter shows. Really enjoy you and Colin collaborating on Sunday night podcasts throughout the season. We were supposed to go tonight, but I think we're going to end up going Monday. So we will have a podcast out Monday with me and him. Big Rams fan. Do you think that if the Rams look like a Super Bowl contender, that full well believe how they finished last year, would Aaron Donald consider unretiring for a playoff run? That way he wouldn't have to go through the rigors of the season and be kind of fresh, like Eric Weddle in 2021. If you remember when Luck retired, they had just given him a huge deal a year or two before. And part of when you retire, if they give you a signing bonus, right? If I, like last year, Aaron Donald, I don't know the details of his contract, but beside that he got $100 million and like 90 was guaranteed and he was making 30 a year. But let's just say they had given him a $45 million signing bonus. Part of that is for like the next 3 seasons, right? Well, if your contract's a couple more years and I give you the $45 million signing bonus, realistically, I can come back and be like, hey, you owe me, you got to cut me a $20 million check or whatever the number. Sometimes you just like, hey, keep it, which I would imagine the Rams would do for him. The Colts did it with Luck because they were always hoping he'd flip-flop. Be like, I'm returning. Pretty clear Donald is not just going to be like, I'm back. I'm back, guys. I'm ready. But he ain't going to get fat like me during the winter. So this is a guy that I would imagine at any moment, like, hey, I'm kind of getting the itch. It's October 25th. Hey, Aaron, the 53rd guy on our roster, we'll put him on the practice squad. Come on home, baby. Maybe it happens in November. Maybe it happens in December. Maybe it never happens. But I 100% would imagine McVay's going to constant communication, come around, come hang out with the guys. You're welcome to work out here. We want you to speak to the team all the time. So, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't stun me at all. Anytime a young player retires who can still really play, especially like Kelsey, for example. If Kelsey's playing, he has to play every snap. He's the full-time starter. He's the center. There's no avoiding the wear and tear. Be like, hey, Aaron, come back, play like 25 snaps a game. I've been a diehard Steelers fan since I was 8. I was fortunate enough to watch the 2005 Super Bowl run. Specifically remember being glued to the screen, watching Troy and his badass hair make play after play. Legend. My question for you is this. What is your favorite early NFL viewing experience that you remember to this day? Can it be watching a specific player, team, game, Super Bowl? Keep up the work. Well, I vividly remember watching, vivid would be strong. I remember watching at my buddy's house the Niners-Chargers Super Bowl. I would have been like 9 years old. And the Niners beat the shit out of that Charger team. I guess I would have been 10 years old because it would have been in 95. So it would have been 10 years old. I remember much more closely the game where Steve Young threw the game-winning touchdown against the Packers to Terrell Owens. And Joe Starkey has the famous call, Owens, Owens, Owens. I remember watching that game at this, I was probably 13 or 14 then. This lady named Laura, who kind of lived down the street, had been my babysitter when I was really young. And I think she was out of town and we were watching her house. And I had gone over there to grab something for my mom. And maybe I watched the game. But I remember having the house to myself, watching the game. And the next day at school, I didn't have a voice. And they had those cool like Niner hats. I mean, every team had them. But the Niners, Cowboys, Packers all had those starter Niner hats that kind of had like a kind of look like a stock market on the bottom. I remember rocking that hat. So it would probably be some of that. Early Niner stuff, Steve Young, late 90s. Favre versus Young, Aikman versus Young, Favre just in general. I remember going to a Giants game when they played a Candlestick in the mid-90s. I had gone to Dusty Baker baseball camp. Dusty Baker, Sacramento guy, and he used to have this baseball camp at Sac City when he was the manager from the Giants. And you go for like 3 or 4 days, and they bus you to a Giants game. It probably was my first ever game. And Barry hit a bomb. into the outfield. I mean, Candlestick was such a shithole, but we were all sitting in the outfield and it was cool. Hey, John, longtime listener from the 805, Santa Barbara. My dad and many of my friends went to Cal Poly, and I recently graduated from USC. Love football and the golf content. But I have a life question for you. I consider myself on a relatively good path, 25 years old, with a stable corporate job, saving money. From your stories, it seems like you've been frugal times to where you are today. Been through frugal times. It wasn't frugal. I wasn't making any money throughout my 20s. I just didn't have any cash. At what point did you feel past the comfortability threshold financially where you could enjoy the fruits of your labor? Any tips for being smart with your money outside of tailing your golf picks? I still don't really feel like that, to be honest with you, because I think in life, you just kind of level up, right? You start renting an apartment, then you buy a condo, then I bought a house, and I used to play shittier golf courses, and then you play nicer golf courses, then ideally join a nicer club, and eventually I'm going to have a kid, maybe two, and your life just changes. So you just kind of, and I don't think, I've never really related to the guy that's like, it's fine. It's almost Friday. Finally Friday. Like I enjoy what I do. So I don't really feel, and this is why my advice of doing what you enjoy to do is I'm never going to stop saying that till the day I get put 6 feet under the ground, because it's really, really important to your mindset. My life doesn't feel like sometimes I like getting out of the house to go to the golf course just to like see some sun. And my only real hobby is like go to the gym. Like I don't do that much. My life's relatively simple. Now I would say over the last couple years, vacations would be strong, but I've done a couple things that I wouldn't have done in the past. But I still am very hesitant. As other people come into your life, and they want to do stuff, it's like, it's football season, or it's like the draft. It's something I'm still working on, and it's probably never gonna just go away for me. But I definitely don't feel comfortable, in the sense of like even right now, like I also could eat Chipotle like twice a day, 7 days a week. I don't get me wrong, I like a good steak at at Morton's or Mastro's, but I like a good Taco Bell drive-through as well, Subway sandwich. I don't give a shit. So in a weird way, I can be bougie at some stuff, but I'm pretty simple, and it all gets back to I just like doing this, and I don't feel like anything. Sometimes like, oh, I got to do this. Even today, I'm recording this. It's Sunday night at 5:30 at night. I get to talk about football, answer questions on Instagram. I mean, this beats being a plumber. So I don't really think about it like that, I guess. I'm of the mindset I kind of always want more. Now, in a healthy way. Like, I'm not obsessed with, like, I got to have this. I got to make this. Like, obviously, I aspire and have aspirations and ambitions that, I truly believe this kind of just keep leveling up, in a healthy way. Not obsessed with like 24/7, got to do this, got to do this. But the drive and the passion for the success of doing whatever I'm doing hasn't really changed from when I was making 20 grand at Fresno State or the Eagles, to the time I got to be the West Coast scout, to when I had a radio show, to now doing a podcast with Coward. I think my mindset's been relatively consistent. So in a weird way, I love the stock market. I invest a lot of money. That would be my advice. Invest money. I don't give financial advice because I'm right and wrong, but invest money. And that's the only way to make your money work for you, especially early on in life. But like, I don't know. I love money, like, because I like to invest and I want, nicer shit, but I'm not consumed with it. So I think that helps kind of balance me out of like, I also don't really get envious. I don't lead really a normal life. Like I don't do, I see my friends going on vacation, do a lot of fun shit. Not that I don't get to do fun shit, but like I don't get caught up in that, which I think is very easy in 2024. And you're younger than me, that in the world we live in, like it's easy to compare, right? Where they say comparison is the thief of joy or something. That it's an Instagram can make you, trust me, if you're single and you see your, people dating ex-girlfriends or whatever, if you're struggling financially and you see, people from college crushing, right? I think the perspective always is like, you got to be thankful for what you have and do everything you can humanly possible if you want more to try to get there. But I just try to keep kind of level headed perspective. Now, it all gets back to, when I was young, I didn't make any money in my 20s, and I never worked harder. Never. Because in football, you work these fucking insane days, 9 months a year. And I made nothing. So it's like it kind of just numbed me to the process of I like working. you know, I don't I enjoy working. And that's why I said do something you like to do. And I think it's much easier to make more money that way because you'll just put in more time. Most people would not. I don't care how much money you make. If you hate your job, you're not going to want to work on Sunday night.